Episode 285. Hopefully, now coming to you all in high audio fidelity. Hello. Welcome to this week's episode of Tactical Crouch. Yiska and I today, no special guest. But hopefully next week we'll probably have we're cooking, okay? That's all I gotta say. We're cooking. Let us cook, okay?
Yeah, we brought your shadow out. We're going to have a Freudian interpretation of the darkest, deepest thoughts of Darth Joe.
on many levels, that in some that are not even necessarily public. This is very very apt, let's say. Very interesting. My therapist may chuckle at this. May have to show her, but I digress. It's been an interesting week. I think last week we had, the stirrings of the initial Gladiators, debacle, rumbling even, to throw it back to the Attack on Titan era of the show. We have had some news drop. Obviously, London making the not so secret move. Glad's also making some interesting signings, and a lot of just esports business to chat about. But there's also some things to be excited about this week, and probably by the time you're listening to this, hopefully some news on the APAC front should be announced. So that'll be exciting. Yiska, anything coming out?
I think like keep like maybe you killed our engagement already, but like we pre-agreed not to go too deep into the weeds of esports business, because I agree, like we're not going to change the situation. We're just beating a dead horse. We all know this. We've been known this. Like I feel like I'm still in 2008, like wide-eyed, believing that this could one day be a feasible sport, and then I realized like maybe we'll just need forever needs like anyone to pony up and finance this, which is fair. Just we can only do like our best, present a product, and eventually, hopefully, once the demographic ages with us and sticks with esports because it's the best entertainment product out there. I think to a degree, this is already true for in some countries. I think Spain is very progressive in terms of streaming integration, at least.
Yeah.
We'll make it. Just another, like, let's be honest, like folks that have been through the first esports winter pretty much expected this, and so here's the silver lining, Joe. The best thing about working through esports winter is that you're now only working with and around people that really want to be here. It's no grifters. Yeah. It's no like fair weathermen. It's all just like the passionate guys that are probably could like be earning way more elsewhere. Of course, like this is you're just being fed cope at this point, but this is how I cope. Okay,
weapons trade.
This is a fine cope. Like from the year of 2008, where I started taking this seriously, and it's aged. Okay, it's a fine cheese.
Listen, Eric, if to peek behind the curtain for a minute, if we could even live up to like live on 3, like that'd be kind of hype. But I don't think that will ever happen.
True.
Shout outs to the real ones. Quite enjoyed some scoots and some DJ Wheat podcastery. That being said, business wise, things are a little rough. We've been known that. And yeah, like there is a bright future, I think, for esports, but there does, and I think a lot of like even like our seniors in the space have been talking about this for ages, and it seems only obvious that there's been needing. That's not even a sentence. Like there's been a need to consolidate. The spending has been just ridiculous. So yeah, this seems like a long time coming. Makes a lot of sense why it's happening now. It doesn't make it easier to see people exit the space or people lose their jobs. It's never what you want to see, especially in the fashion that it happened to the folks at the guards who send nothing but my fondest respects to.
Yep.
But yeah, it sucks. It makes sense why it's happening. But there's a lot of reasons why, even outside of just copium huffing, why that there is some seeds left to be sown, right? That said,
Yep.
there is some Overwatch news happening that is exciting to kind of dive into and talk about, and possibly leak our own scrim results, because I don't know about you guys, but Yiska and I are actually trying out for the Overwatch Olympics. Okay, so those who are funding our professional scrim result, or our professional scrimmaging, are you guys, the patron producers. Am I joking? I don't know. You're gonna have to find out. So thank you so much to Avril Vista Baby, Battle Crab, Refund Beam, Bronze Bob, Boohow, Picasso, Chris R34444, Claster67, Lolshin, Porkchop Sammy, Rexane, and our YouTube members, I am DRW, Brother, Adam L, Sagi Vumi, Ice M Jello, Biomet 6, AK Chris R. Thank you so much for supporting. What's our team name, Yiska?
Huh. I don't know.
You're terrible at improv.
Yeah.
Why couldn't we just been like race car noises? That's our team name.
Right.
I decided.
Okay.
Race car noises. Like,
why,
but like asterisked.
Yes,
like bird noises.
Can't you do improv after 12 hours and at midnight?
I feel like that would be the best time to do improv.
Right, but like I still have to keep my filters up in order to be employable.
No. See, that's where you're wrong. I feel like most people in this community would all agree that Yiska is at peak humor when the filters are down, and he actually just embraces his inner zoomer that he locks away, like the shadow that is positioned above me, that has now stepped into the room. You have to embrace your inner shadow, which I think just looks like a zoomer.
Possible, yeah. Now, I've long thought this is an immature soul kept in an increasingly old body that keeps aching, and just, yeah.
Oh. You can't fight it. There's something in you that just wants to press the funny button that has Cardi B say some funny things.
She's
just
hilarious,
for no reason.
I think about it, but the problem is, like, when I hit it, A, this part of a song, so even if we could make it on the VOD, we'd get copy striked, and B, I don't have the technology. You would only be able to hear it, and then it would only be half as funny.
You just have to be there. There are ways that could happen, but it just doesn't make feasible sense. So, in Gladiators news, wait, we had some Gladiators puns lined up. I can't remember where they are.
Where's your improv? Where's your improv, Joe?
It was okay. I'm gonna be the semantics Andy.
Can't figure out to even remember the jokes that someone else wrote for them, but demands improv of me after like 24-hour shift at the fucking coal mines. Like, come on.
Anyways, Glad signed Kai, and sort of surprising news. I don't know. I think that's kind of interesting immediately after like the Yaki signing, to fill out the DPS stable among, the, wider controversy, I suppose, is probably safe to say. I feel like Kai is a pretty exciting addition to this team. One that should, or at least expectationally, shove them in the top theater in NA, no?
It's super competitive. I actually have an interview with Junkbuck coming out, and we were like going back and forth on their ability to be top 5. It's interesting, and that sounds preposterous with this roster, by the way. But the NA.
Are you saying for Glads or for Houston? Just to be clear.
For Glads, yeah. We were. Okay. I asked him like, what do you think is your top competition? And he went like, I think, and then it went like, oh no, I can't say one team. I think the top 3. I think the top 5 will be, and I'm like, okay. And then even then, like, we couldn't really hone in on 5 because, like, realistically, like, you have Atlanta, you have Houston, you have Shock, you have
Shock.
Boston, you have Toronto, Mayhem as an outside shot. Interestingly, I think like what Junkbug was high on is like the ability of Dante to perform. But we'll
Okay.
see. Like once again, like that interview is coming out on Friday, so it's coming out before you watch this. But yeah, this. Sorry, it's coming out after you watch this,
After.
probably.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's increasingly hard. Like it's a sick roster, but there are some question marks around Dante. For me, I think I'm probably underrating Lastro. It's not a bad roster for sure, but
No, not at all.
we'll see. We'll see.
It's not a bad roster, and I think that's difficult to kind of decouple from, like that initial like knee jerk reaction when we kind of throw a lot of critique towards the 2023 Gladiators, right? Like they kind of live in a shadow of a team that was probably the closest they've been to like championship contending, right? To win, the first stage, go into the midseason, perform extremely well. Obviously hit a slump with, Junker Queen and then kind of sort of end the season on a flat note. Obviously isn't ideal. But for a team that kind of has been gate kept from like stage finals or even participating in like some of the stage playoffs in seasons prior, I don't think it's crazy to say that the 2022 Gladiators were the closest, that the team has got, right? And if we're going to call a spade and we're going to just be real for a second, this is just a downgrade. It just is. And that's no shade to any of these players. I think much, to echo your point around Dante, I too was like very surprised with his performance in the playoffs. I thought he like really rose to the occasion. His Winston looked more than capable. If you told me that was like an emergency sub, if you like, again, the thought experiment of like stripping away the nameplates, removing the bias, and just looking at strictly the gameplay, I thought they actually had like that. If you would have told me that was the situation that they were under, where they didn't have a main tank or they chose not to play with the main tank that they signed on a whatever contract, I would have been that would have been kind of surprising. So it's not crazy to me, in the future if you tell me that Dante looked good in 2023, right? That's not wild to me. But then you start to look at the supports and it's like, okay, how can you really improve, Funny Astro, Skewed, and Shu? You can't. I'm sorry, that's just next to impossible. You're not going to improve that. So it's, the replacements that they've gotten kind of live in that shadow, right? Kester is a fantastic talent. He is one of the only hyperflexes that you can like boldface say can do it all, right? He is paired with a stable that should complement him extremely, extremely well on paper. But like I've been saying for I don't know how many shows, probably since the start of the 2022 season, Yaki is not necessarily my favorite player ever. That's not to say that he's bad. It's more to the note that he seems to want to dictate a very particular style and a very particular tempo that isn't always, fit within a team dynamic or a team system, let's say. Um, and I really would love to see a team built around him as like the initial like signing. You have Yaki, you have the coaching staff, and then you build a team that kind of fits around, the kind of talent that Yaki is. Now, I say this wholeheartedly not having seen any of these like reported leaked scrims. I probably will watch them in the future. Will I comment on them? I don't know. Um, that said, that's just kind of my synopsis of this roster, where it's like it's not, again, like you're saying, Yiska, it's not bad. Nothing about this team is necessarily bad, but does it necessarily contend with the Shocks, the Atlantas, the Dallas? It doesn't necessarily make a ton of sense to me. I just don't necessarily see how this team consistently competes. They check all the boxes, how it all kind of comes together, how the styles necessarily mesh. Is the backline going to be suspect at that, level of refinement? Again, not that it's bad, but is it world class? Is it championship contending? That kind of remains to be seen for me, at least.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. Yeah, I think like, yeah, I'm probably underrating Lastro. I'm kind of interested to see what a funny Astro that plays everything looks like. I think that's an right. That's a big question mark. Pretty much like the mechanism that we think about when we thought about Fearless and whatnot. I think like realistically, here's how I would coin it: the Smurf mechanism. Okay.
Okay.
Because Smurf was always on the team with Super. And then everything was sort of like they had to share a champion pool. So we never really, like he never really had to show anything else. But then once Smurf was, you know, on his own team, the only tank, he showed like a wide range of heroes that he could play, right? And I feel like that is a mechanism will be interesting to see also for Astro. I'm excited for that in that team. I also think I'm excited for the coaching opportunities here. I think the like that team feels more coachable and more receptive towards the style of coaching that Gladiators have here. Is it crazy to say that I like this DPS line more than last year's?
No, I don't think that's crazy at all. I think there was a lot of like hesitation. I think that there's some hesitation this year within, at least for me, within regards to Yaki, but like a Kai Kevster core for the like majority of a stage feels to me like a very, very safe and comfortable bet, and probably probably the most consistent you're probably going to see Gladiators perform the entire year is if you can lock in Kai Kevster, you put them on comfortable heroes. That's going to net you the bread and butter for this team. And I wouldn't be surprised if that's not the that's not the duo that sees the lion's share of the playtime throughout the entire season. I again, that's no shame towards Yaki's talent. But again, when you look at his gameplay, you look at like, especially even last year, look at how what really sticks out to me in particular was NYXL's Zarya's composition, especially at the start of the season and when Zarya kind of became like the meta within NA. It was they were the all-star pass Michael Jordan the ball, get out of his way team before Dallas even kind of like stepped into that, right? Before Dallas was passing the ball to Edison on Reaper, double bubbling him and kind of forcing away these positions. You look at specifically some of NYXL's early season games last year. It was Yaki on Circuit Royal, playing Echo, getting 2 bubbles, and just making all the space. Like, he is that star player who will just do it himself if he isn't already like respecting the system, if he isn't necessarily like a part of the team just yet. And it seemed that way at the start of the season for the NYXL. I can see that necessarily. Actually, after writing that piece about Yaki that you so, graciously kind of voice acted, I think you can kind of like trace that throughout his entire career, where even going back to MVP space, this kid is just like trying to make plays. He is the hero. He wants to be, the protagonist of his own anime. And that just isn't always the case. That isn't always the right decision. That isn't always, what maybe the team needs him to do. So yes, he can check all the boxes. Yes, he can play most characters under the sun. But do you want a flanking or hyper aggressive Echo all the time? Is that something that your team can kind of be molded around? That is kind of the big question mark for me when it comes to this team. I have no suspicion around Kai. I think he's a known quantity. If anything, I thought he was a little bit stagnant in terms of just like the way that he would position on Atlanta. Whereas like, I think that, Sparkr, obviously returning to the London Spitfire, but we'll get into him. I thought that they had better necessarily macro on push. I thought that was something that we kind of picked up on pretty early. With that kind of head-to-head matchup where Kai necessarily didn't have the same amount of support. So I'm kind of looking forward to like that growth from it. but he didn't seem super mobile or super agile with his positioning. So that's probably the only criticism I can really levy against him. I think his like mid to long range hit scans are all fantastic. I think he is going to be a great complement to Kevster. It's just what kind of meta gambles are you necessarily rolling this season, and how many of them call for Yaki? How does this coaching staff integrate him? That's the big $1 billion question for the Gladiators if they can maintain the same expectations as they did last year, at least for me.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's going to be interesting. I think there's this very real chance that they're going to be booked in top 5.
Okay, let's not get too crazy. Like when you say top 5, you mean 5th, right? I can't, in good faith, try to put them above that.
So let's look. As high as 3rd, I think.
Sure, like given the utmost meta gamble, you roll Snake Eyes for this team and they pog off and play out of their gourd. I can see as high as 3rd, but like in actuality, do you think that that's going to consistently happen? Like in you know, do a Doctor Strange for me. Do you think that that's like the multitude of multiverses?
Top 3, no. Top 5, yeah.
Yeah, like it's a 4th and a 5th. Like 4th even still is a little aggressive, and that's now maybe Eric and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's even disregarding the opportunity for strength of schedule. No.
I mean, we don't know the strength of the schedule yet. That's
what I'm saying, right? Like, if like this conversation gets a lot more interesting when we get the strength of schedule, right? So even before we get to how difficult their schedule might be in an already kind of highly competitive region, it feels.
Here's my master plan for strength of schedule, by the way, Joe.
Okay.
You don't tell anyone what you're doing. You just like keep the schedule close to the chest. You run the Pro-Am, and then you use that to inform your ELO system and create the strength of schedule based on that. But you're not. But like even because in any other case where you don't tell people that, they then start gaming the system by being way worse, you know, like than they need to be or whatnot. Maybe I already let the genie out the bottle. No, I think like realistically we need to see the schedule before the Pro-Am is over. But yeah, this could be interesting.
It is weird, and it does sound like in the mid-season, I do think that this is confirmed from, I believe, the original community countdown breakdown from Sean Miller on Plat Chat, that they are going to refer to the mid-season standings for the summer schedule. Eric, is that correct? Am I?
Yep.
Okay, that is public. That is out there. So that's not necessarily unheard of for them to like want to do that, and I do think that's probably the best way with the cards that they've been given, them being the Overwatch League front office, to kind of handle this. If you want to like try to eliminate strength of schedule as much as possible, because let's face it, what was it, 2021, 2020, like that era, strength of schedule was pretty abysmal, right? Like there were just some teams that just got to play, Boston and Vancouver like twice, and it was just, you had 2 free extra wins, right? And that's not ideal for anybody. But when it comes to North America, a lot of teams are kind of under the button, and I don't know that Gladiators are just an insta lock when it comes to like the upper echelon. That we talk about how the league is kind of stratified. It was the good teams, the middle of the pack, and the low teams, and maybe you have like a gatekeeper tier in there. I think the Gladiators are closer to being gatekeepers this year than last year, right? Last year, again, very not dominant. Well, sort of dominant. Very, very good. Lots of results, lots of like reasons to be excited about that team. A lot of those pieces kind of falling away. Some replacements come in that are, again, competitive, but comparable. Hard to agree with. I think, to circle back to the initial point that you made around the DPS, I do think that's probably the only area that I would say that they did upgrade. I don't think that you can necessarily say that Dante for Reiner is like even like a fair trade, especially with Dante being, this is his first season. As much as you don't want to glow about his playoffs performance last year.
You don't need to compare them as players. You just need to compare the tank line to the tank line, and then it's very clear that Dante alone can't be better than Space and Reiner, right?
Yep. And that would be the ideal situation, right? Like the ideal is that, the guard doesn't implode and the Cronkies don't want to just completely, rethink their esports strategy and fire all these people who, again, I send nothing but my condolences and, best wishes to. The ideal situation would be to see the Gladiators add another tank here to kind of shore up this roster like we're seeing with the Atlantas, with the Shocks, obviously, recently with Junbin. But the, the chances of that happening at this point are like negative. No, like that just can't happen.
Yeah, I know I'm also not too concerned.
I mean, I'm not concerned either, but if I want, like, I guess it depends on your end goal, right? If the end goal for this team is to win a championship, I'm sorry, that's just not, like, that's very slim chances, right? If you gunned ahead, you asked me if that's in their cards. No, I don't think that's
right.
It's tough. That's a hard one to.
You need a very good meta for that, yeah.
You would need the best meta, right? You would need basically Doomfist for the playoffs, and God knows what, Afara maybe. It's tough, but I do think the DPS trio here is incredibly talented. If they can solve Pandora's box and integrate Yaki in and not have him just be not if he can kind of step back and let maybe a Kevster or maybe Kevster and Kai can kind of be that secondary, threat to Yaki's like hyper aggression, like protagonist style, then maybe. But I also think that that's also a tough thing to want to do perpetually, right? Where it's like I have to just play supportive because that's just what my teammate demands of me, or at least it feels like it is demanding of me. It's tough. That's not to say the Gladiators are bad. They have upgrade in some areas, but is it the same team? Kind of can't be, right?
No.
That said, we did mention that London has re-signed Sparkr, so we are getting a little bit closer to London 2.0. Obviously, I think it was Hottie who wrote some welcome to who wrote the lovely welcome message with two names hilariously emojied away. Shocking nobody. London is not necessarily done with their team just yet. I think there are some reports out there about who that might be. We will not comment. Well, I won't comment on them. Maybe Yiska wants to, but I think so far so good for London, right? I think they've gotten back a lot of their pieces that you'd want to keep, right? I think, if funnily enough, the one piece that I was kind of skeptical of them keeping is remained with Backbone. Anything here? Any thoughts with London coming into 2023?
If they land 6th or 7th this year, that's arguably an even bigger achievement than last year.
Okay. Is that more to the competitiveness of NA, or is that hinting at any kind
Both.
of like?
It's the competitiveness of the league, and it's also the struggle of running it back like that. It's down to probably having to find a meta composition that works for them consistently.
Okay.
It's
hopefully that doesn't revolve around Sombra.
It's down to not having the surprise factor of being underrated anymore. This is a harder year for them.
Do you think? Okay, I'm gonna be controversial here. Maybe potentially controversial. I don't know. Do you believe? And I'm take this verbatim. Do you believe that the league itself will stop itself from underrating the London Spitfire? Does that make sense? If I'm Malip, if I'm Junbin, if I'm Proper, if I'm hit me with another one, Fearless. do I look at, Hottie sitting across from me and not necessarily kind of have a bias there where it's, oh, it's just London. Like,
Nah, I
who
think if
cares?
anything, fans still have more of a bias against this team than the players.
Okay.
Everyone, especially coaches, have a lot of goodwill for this team and a lot of appreciation what they achieved.
Okay.
I think practically everyone I talk to, it's not like a team that they have on the forefront of their mind that they're like scared shitless of.
Sure.
But there's a lot of respect for what this team has been able to accomplish, the fundamentals of this team, and also their development. And yeah, I think it's just a well-led dog, right? Like in that.
No, 100%. And that's kind of like the impetus to a lot of like the bounce back, at least from my camp, is like seeing the success historically of these little experiments or these little like hyper stylistic things where in some definitions of the word, I think you can look at London last year as a hyper stylized team, not just because they played a little bit more Rhine than the rest of the league guys. No, this isn't the Rhine team anymore. Even though I think they do have the capability to leverage a style against an esport ecosystem, I think as a whole, that is still is a little gun shy at doing what is best for them, right? One example, or the way that I always kind of explain it to some people, is like carpenters and bakers, right? It's very clear that London and Christopher and Nuki both know, and Commander X, everybody at that team knows that this is a team of bakers. So they don't try to compete in carpentry competitions, right? They compete in baking competitions. They bake cakes. They bake bread. They don't need to worry about competing in outside realms. They're going to do what they, they're going to play to their strengths. I know. I am. So I think in some ways that is a style. I think that is a well-led team. I think it's a very mature team to admit, like, hey, obviously they've spoken on this road and interviews with you about, setting expectations and kind of accepting that, we're not necessarily going to be the best team, but you can do a lot with what you have. And these aren't bad players, right? I think we've corrected the record. Not we, but I think Hottie's corrected the record on who he is as a player. I think that backline is a lot more respectable than I think people give it credit for. And Sparkr is, I think we have to kind of admit that this is a top tier hit scan, right? I think that it's not too crazy to say that the difference between Sparkr and Kai is not necessarily super different. No, it feels almost kind of lateral, right?
Yeah, I think P Kai I have more confidence in, but
Sure.
Let's be honest, last season was also not P Kai. So we'll see what we get this year. Right.
And that's kind of where London sits at least right now. Obviously, it's very public. They're still not done, announcing their entire roster. I think that should be a sign of confidence for this team. Mm-hmm. They've always done a great job at scouting new talent. And from the early winds of change, it doesn't sound like they've gone back on that.
Thank you for that earworm. Rent free.
We got condos, baby. Yeah. So we'll see with London. I think they can run it back. I think it is going to take some time to beat into the public that this is a team to be respected and that NA just isn't full of bye week teams. We have some bye week teams. We'll have to wait and see what the Valiant look like.
Yep.
I know that you're a little bit more down on Vancouver than I am, but okay. Let me throw that edge. Okay, not a bye week team. Okay, you knew the question. You understood the assignment. All right. Not a bye week. So in speculative news, I suppose, after a pretty heartfelt twit longer, Soul Infernal, former Philly Fusion GM Roston, did announce that the Infernal are going to be announcing players this week, and the way that it was worded It does sound like it is going to be kind of staggered out, piece by piece. Maybe by the time you're listening to this, maybe some of the players have been announced already. But as of recording this, all we know is that the old DPS duo of MN3 and Zest are the core. Is there anything we can parse out from that? Is there anything there that we're excited about?
I mean, expected. And yes, I agree. Like, this is a big reason to believe that Philly will definitely have something to say about being one of the best teams in APAC, right? Currently, there's probably two teams that you got to look at this point that are fighting for the top spots, and then it's Philly after that, I think. And then of course you gotta still, you can't count Profit out, right? Like in terms of Soul Infernal, Soul Dynasty. My bad. This is not going to be confusing at all. But then again, my brain managed it with LA, so shape up brain.
It's just gonna be a shift. It's gonna be a shift.
To be fair, one team of that has been largely irrelevant and erased from my brain for the longest time. So
still probably will be.
Right. Bottom line. Also, what a great Troidslander. This is, like,
I think he hit the nail on the head in the first line where he's like, "No, this isn't a Twitlonger. This is Twitlongest."
Yeah.
And he meant it. That was a lot of. I'm not gonna lie. There is no fraudulence here. Didn't read the entire thing. Skimmed most of it. That's a lot of reading.
Yeah.
Not too much. Not that big of a Philly fan.
Yeah.
But it was nice to see it. A proper send off for some of those players. So it was cool.
For sure. Yeah. I was kind of scared that it would be paired with Roston's retirement, as they tend to do. Also because Roston, like, there was a Reddit thread, like, took down branding, blah, 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 from probably just to, in the transition to the new brands. Yeah, I think I'm looking forward to what kind of talent they're still cooking up, what the team will be. It would be kind of a shame if that DPS duo was wasted on mediocre teammates. I think to a degree I already felt that last year. They were very clearly the best players on their team.
You didn't like Match Fixer? Come on. Come on. Jeff? You didn't like Jeff? Shout out to Aim God.
I feel like they probably contributed a lot outside of game, but yeah, like, once again, this is an expression of the quality that DPS duo has in comparison to the rest of the team. And they just were like two standard deviations away from those top performers. And I would even say Zest was probably clearly better than MN3 as well. So just in aggregate over the entire season ability to
that was my because
you
said the C word consistently.
Yeah, like, I feel like Zest is really like an outstanding talent that sort of came out of nowhere and is sort of like, look, you can be skeptical about getting rid of EKO as a very important factor, but if you're then fielding Zest, that makes most of the pain go away. I think Zest is all around probably just a better EKO. And his ability to, especially early in the season, to hard carry and go this is, some of his performances were Yaki-esque consistently, right? Like, just like forcing yourself onto the other team on Genji and just taking ridiculous one-on-ones and whatnot and deciding it because he also had to. So I'm excited. Whatever team has MN3 and Zest, it has me excited. Also just because they play pretty attractive Overwatch, but yeah, I gotta see what else they have in store. I think it has been pretty quiet around them. What kind of other players they're picking up?
Sure.
And it should be interesting to see what kind of what other team building has been happening there. There are some heavy hitters still out there. I don't think they necessarily, like someone like Top Dragon, for instance, that seems more like a soulbound playoff
Yeah.
for the other side. I'm not sure. No leaks. That's just once again. I'm not that connected in APAC.
Just makes
That's
sense.
just a good player that makes sense because of the Genji connection.
Yep.
So we'll see. Like it's. I'm mostly concerned for quality main tank play, and we got to figure that out. I personally would have loved for them to get someone like Helen in.
Yes.
I feel like that's a weird. It kind of exemplifies how one bad rookie season just like ruins a lot of opportunities when it shouldn't.
Yeah.
I think
Especially knowing the situation, like it's not probably a solid representation of who Kellen is. But yeah, what kind of finish your point there?
yeah, I think like who else is there even like for
I mean, I'm not even. This is probably the lowest hanging fruit, but I do genuinely believe this. I kind of don't hate the idea of keeping Belisari and Fury. Do I think that it was incredible? No. Um, but maybe this is recency bias speaking, but I didn't hate Belisaria's ball. I thought there was a lot of room to grow there. I thought Fury was mostly serviceable. I don't think the team as a whole was like fantastic, but like if you were to re-sign them, I don't hate it, right? It doesn't leap off the page, but is anything really going to when you have M3 and Zest, right? Like you're pretty much the rest of the lineups for this team are probably going to kind of live and die by how good those two DPS players are, right? If M3 and Zest aren't necessarily performing up to snuff, then the team probably as a whole isn't necessarily performing at all. Um, that said, yeah, I would like to see. I thought Kellen could have landed on either Soul team and done probably extremely well. Probably would have been a great like +1, right? Great addition. Somebody there to play some of the main tanks. I thought his flex tanks last year were like above average for playing on a team that was pretty hot garbage. Um, I guess to step outside of the realm of speculation, is this the season that MN3 kind of has to put up or shut up when it comes to consistency? Because again, you brought up the big C word, right? Zest was the most consistent player for this team. Zest was the kind of hero in a lot of cases where MN3 had the probably one of the most, if not the most. Well, I think Prophet might have some words, especially early last season, but MN3's Ash on Two Queens. I don't even remember who it was against. I remember the hero though. Was kind of legendary. That was like one of the performances
Agreed.
that kind of assembles a career in front of you and really takes the world by the shirt collar and shakes you, runs your pockets, let's say, right?
Yep.
However, that player did not show up every game, and there was a constant rotation with Carpe and MN3, even though MN3 seemed to be pretty proficient on a lot of the roles. Is there questions regarding how good this player can be? Do we think MN3 can be that guy for the Soul Infernal this season?
I think so. I think a big one is I hope he just like shaped up on. My understanding was a lot of his troubles last year were that Sojourn is a hybrid between projectile and hitscan, because the left click is not a strict hitscan mechanic, right? And they said like his tracking is an issue. It's not really necessarily the tracking; it's that aspect of the tracking, right? So they switched around between Carpe and MN3 a bunch. I think like MN3 has some of the sickest point and click mechanics in the league, and like I also don't expect Sojourn to be as heavily played this year as she was.
Oh, you don't think so?
Probably not.
Maybe not as heavily played, but I still think she's probably useful, right?
We'll see. It's all dependent on meta and patches, right? But
Yeah.
once we get on the harder hit skins, I'm a little bit more concerned what happens. Like, let's say we get a Genji meta, or
Yeah.
let's say we have Like anything that just consistently has him only play like Tracer or God forbids like any
Yep.
Sombra comps or anything like
Yeah.
that.
Please Jesus.
Then again, we don't know if there's a backup DPS here also, right? Like that could also be the
Yep.
case. Like a specialist there. So maybe, but once again, it's a little early to talk about all of this. But I agree, this has to be the year where, like, it's almost like, is this Pine syndrome? Not really. I think like M3 already has done much more in his rookie season than Pine did. But you get the drift, right? Like
Yeah. I get what
flashy,
you're picking up.
high impact, but only in a couple of matches, and then like not consistently. And like ideally, you'd probably just want him to come in for specific maps. And no, you got to step up to be a starter this year. Of course, it has a lot to do with the meta and if that serves you. But if you want to entrench yourself in the S tier meta, you now have to put up or shut up and over a wide range of heroes, and you got half a year to practice up, and there are no excuses left to hide behind anymore, right?
Yeah. No, wholeheartedly. As long there's no excuses if Soul are reasonable, and for all intents and purposes, I think Roston and Co. at the Soul Infernal are pretty sizably. They got some reasonality right to them. They're definitely pretty. They got their heads on straight. Let's put it that way. So I have to assume that coaches Jin and Chara probably have a third DPS lined up. But let's kind of look at the keys to success, as cringy and as sports broadcast halftime desk of me as that is. There are some keys here for this team, right? At least on the surface. Zest can kind of be your hyperflex for the most part, and even saying that, I kind of want to take that back because I don't know if he's a hyperflex. I think he's like, hyperflex adjacent, let's say. Is very flexible, right? Zest did showcase a lot of flexibility last year. I think we need a little bit more, evidence to kind of label him as such, but very flexible player will probably be the person you rotate around, right? Much like last year kind of happened. MN3, as much as maybe some of the, I think, people will kind of point to some of his contenders' performances and say, oh, yeah, there was a tracer there, here. I just don't see it, right? It really did not showcase well. Neither did Carpe, to be fair, and that was a big criticism I levied against him for ages ago, since probably 2020 Philly. It just doesn't work. So you probably need somebody to play Tracer, somebody probably more closer to MN3. That probably there is some overlap there. Obviously, you can't just sign a Hyperflex. That's a little bit more, difficult. But I think you do need a Tracer specialist, or at least somebody who can play Tracer at like a solid world class level. When you're starting to look at like the Sparks of the world, where reports are coming out that even Shire, connecting at the hip with a Gusha frontline, like come on now, like that might even just win APAC. That's kind of a nuts lineup. So how does an MN3 Zest get to the best ecosystem around them? You probably need a Tracer. If we look at the historical context for the Asian Pacific region, they are more dive leaning. So having somebody not too dissimilar to a Belisria, probably a little bit more flexible. I'd want like a Winston main tank player, because again, most of the time, you're probably big bunny ears for the audio listeners, most of the time, playing a lot of dive, playing a lot of flex tanks that are a little bit more mobile. APAC has never necessarily been big on playing Reinhardt. They'll just play Doom into it. They'll find ways around it. They'll opt for a different style. It'll kind of ingrain itself within the scrim meta in contenders or in the top contenders teams, and that'll kind of bleed up from there, right? So yeah, do Soul have a Winston player, right? These are questions maybe you need to ask yourself listening to this as, the week progresses. Because again, we're operating from the knowledge of the past, where all they have right now is MN3 Zest. So big things to look for. Tracer player, Winston player, maybe even a second tank. Do they have somebody with a diva, with a Zarya? Somebody maybe with past experience could be useful for this team, right? I think the back line, if anything, I think Dallas has kind of ruined me in regards to looking and like outweighing how good a backline needs to be. Um, there are some heavy hitters on the market. I don't know what's up. Oh no, I keep always wanting to go. Where's Twilight going? But he's on Boston.
Right.
But within regards to Dallas and like how successful that backline was, that's no shade to Fielder, but like that team wasn't necessarily super driven by that. Chio and Fielder being like extreme playmakers and hyper aggressive and like doing all these nuts things. They kind of just did their jobs, and that was plenty good, right? Good enough for the most part. So I don't know that Seoul needs like a crazy support duo or trio to kind of get it over the line. I think a lot of that like metaphorical fantasy budget probably is spent on that tracer player to kind of round out the DPS trio. And again, if the esports winter is constricting in Seoul, maybe it's just a Winston player. Maybe it's a Winston, maybe with some diva history. And I think the team is probably pretty competitive and kind of lives up to the expectations that you kind of outlined at the beginning, right?
Yeah, no, for sure.
So that is, something that should be developing in the remainder of the week. But as we kind of head to NA for a moment, you did kind of have a groundbreaking, experimental maybe, interview with the Toronto Defiant, talking to the entire team all at once, which is probably difficult to navigate, but I think you did it, at least for the bits that I've listened to so far, pretty reasonably. How did that kind of filter out for you? If you haven't listened to it yet, please go listen to it. Click the ads. Yiska, how'd you like it?
I mean, there's of course a lot of things I would improve in terms of like technical standpoint and how to
Sure.
like it's an unusual situation, especially because Majed was not there, and
Yeah,
right, it's sort of like an unknown interview situation, and I'll try to get more of those. But okay, despite like self-criticism, I thought like what it was interesting for me to discover was that they're kind of aware that like synergy is like a thing that still needs to be worked on, because keep in mind the last time they played together this was still a 6-man game. Keep in mind that this is also like they grew as people under different coaching staffs. One of the interesting ones was OG saying that he feels the Shock guys are currently ahead of the others in game understanding.
sure.
And that's something that's going to be interesting. I agree that a couple of them not only just feel like they stayed below their potential, but actually also probably did, reasonably speaking. And yeah, there's a lot of upside to this team. I think it's hopefully like it's pretty important for the health of the league that they do well. Just like,
Sure.
this is sort of like, Team USA.
Likely to be.
At least in large parts. I'm not sure if
I mean, if those trials are anything to go by.
right.
Shout out to Vegas. That was a little rough.
Yeah, but
That being said,
yeah, I feel like this is it was pretty interesting to see how they interact with each other. It was interesting to see how much they believe in Kalush. So yeah, going forward, definitely a team I'll probably catch 100% of the matches from, and potentially absolutely a team that could be top 5. Right?
now you say you're gonna try to catch all the matches. Is that out of a morbid curiosity of how much shit talking this team is capable of doing, or is that based in some sort of genuine interest?
I kind of
Maybe both.
Like I feel like we almost have put them into a situation where it's just like we dared them to be mature and they're living up to the task, and now we sort of made our own bed and it sucks. Like Like I feel like they were all super reasonable, super calm. Like they had a couple of
No,
jokes.
yes.
They all like it's I almost want them to be a little bit more unhinged, which unfortunately they're probably not going to be. Uh, but
I think there's plenty of reason to assume that, maybe the environment, maybe the task at hand was a little bit, unfamiliar to them. Whereas, put him in a game environment, put him in front of a camera after a win. I think I
sure.
think, I think matured seems very, applicable here. I
Yeah, I
don't think
mean
anybody's doing anything,
that's
out of hand, out of pocket, but I think there's some juice in the tank for sure.
I think it's also just fair to say we're like let's first earn our rights to
Sure.
be
That's
cocky,
more than
right?
fair.
And then
I
let's see if
it seemed
they're
like the type 2
they're
of me.
4-0, like how that
Yeah.
stuff then fares, right?
See
Um,
if see if Sam shows up in a suit, just
like
here so he doesn't get fined. Who knows?
yeah, for sure. So yeah, also like once again, thank you for the Toronto Defiant. I think they still have a pretty sweet setup. Like they offered that to me. I didn't even think Overwatch League teams still had that option,
Yeah,
and
right.
that's definitely something I'm going to pursue with a couple of other teams. How
Mhm.
likely that is to be possible is different, right?
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, like overall, an interesting team. I have some. I don't want to tease too much. We'll
Don't
see.
tease.
But okay,
Be
let me
excited.
tease this. There is on Friday, if that happens,
Yeah.
and I wouldn't be too like the time zones are very like challenging to make it work, but there's a possibility that I'm going to interview No Hill, and I'm looking forward to that as well.
Ooh, definitely somebody who I selfishly have always wanted to talk to, even just X's and O's wise. Um, in both in strategy and in the overall team assembly, let's say. Um, I think that so far so good when it comes to Toronto, right? I think, hearing that they approached you regarding the interview and it seems like they're on a media tour, it feels like.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like anybody who's kind of a creator in the space has touched base with the Toronto. I think Spilo's also talked to them. I think there's some, content creators out there as well who have interviews with them.
Good on them.
Um, and I think that not only is that good on them, that should be like standard for standard. Um, it should be a more of a practice for a lot of teams. I think that it does everybody some
Right.
good. But I think for this team in particular, I think it makes just the most sense, right? Like
Yeah.
these are hyper marketable. That's no shade to their talent. I think this is still a competitive team. If you have any questions regarding that, circle back to a couple shows ago where I tried to argue them against Atlanta,
Right.
which I don't know. This still too far off. We'll see though. Um, this is a really, really, exciting team, explosive team. It's going to be must watch Overwatch. Um, I want to see these kids at LAN. They have, prior synergy and a lot of things to prove. You look at Speedily last year, kind of coming in half baked, didn't get a ton of time on stage. Time that he did have, I don't think he necessarily lived up to expectations. A lot of weight there, playing against, or rather with, a lot of people he's played with before, right? Um, but when you talk about No Hill and like the actual in-game strategy, that's where my eyebrows get peaked. That's where I'm like, okay, when you look at what happened with the Valiant, you look at some of that information coming out where it's, circa 2018, 2008 rather. Like I think you mentioned a couple shows ago, like, I felt like this was a team house tour with Arctosis where people are just sleeping on, you know, rocks and sticks and covering themselves up with blankets and playing StarCraft for 18 hours a day, right? Like it was not necessarily tenable. Sounds like there's still ongoing talks within that organization in the Overwatch League. And to be able to kind of find some success, some modicum of success with that team kind of comes down to coaching, right?
Right.
And one thing that I was blown away by, that I will still kind of credit No Hill with, was their use of Diva and their double flex support strategy, where they kind of treated Dorado Point A on defense as this kind of poke-esque map that kind of gave teams a lot of trouble. And I feel like that is specifically a tie to No Hill. So my question to you in this long-winded context-ridden abysmal paragraph ramble, is that a fair summary? Do you think that this team could be a little bit deeper in terms of skill level than maybe people are going to accept at first glance because of No Hill? Do you think that he can kind of come in and give them that cheesy edge, if you will?
I don't know about cheesy, but definitely the edge of APAC knowledge and playing it differently, right? I think that's something that Soros highlighted, is he enjoyed about No Hill that he has a different view of the macro and micro, or specifically macro, and can challenge him and can bring new ideas. And No Hill also just beat the ever-loving shit out of everyone in Trials. And yeah, I think it's not about cheese. It's like about a different side of fundamentals. Okay, this is not like, you know, Krav Maga or whatever. This is Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu here. Okay, that's the bread and butter of Overwatch. Shout outs to Avril, where the best Overwatch has been played over the last couple of seasons. So
Some would say since the beginning.
Sure. So yeah, I feel like it's an unorthodox pick, but one I really, really like.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important to bring something fresh into a team of guys that have worked together before, and like to have you know, some avenues of improvement that were previously not accessible to this bunch.
Sure.
And yeah, I think that I know when. Okay, this is where I pull back a little bit of the curtain. We had a Crouch episode where, like, initially I wasn't as high on AT. You know, we were like, I was kind of like shit talking them, mostly just because you pissed me off with overrating them a little bit too much.
Sure.
But then I heard that No Hill was picked up, and then I was like, there's a factor here that changed my outlook.
The universe speaks to me in many different ways, Yiska.
And this was,
you know, this the most.
The pickup of No Hill actually really changed the outlook of me for this team. Not that I didn't trust Casaurus, but I thought this is now interesting just from a strategical point of view, because, like, if you look at every team, you need more than one genius on the coaching staff, right? I think it's like I'd love to be mouse on the wall if it's already just Rush. I think we probably that's probably just a knowledge wall where people like Aid and
sure. Like Rascal obviously probably should have helped out there too.
I even interviewed him. So I'm very sorry if I'm missing the name of the second. Oh, God damn it!
Hey, I mean,
but also of course Rascal in the past.
Yeah.
There's like too many cooks in the Overwatch kitchen is not 3. Okay.
Jiang?
That's the sorry.
That's previous. Continue. Oh look.
So once again, like I love that how deep the coaching staff also is. I didn't know about Wheats. I'll tell you that much. And that's another pleasant surprise. And that those like Wheats, they kind of like explain to be this culture guy, like OG. I think the quote I have in mind is like, Wheats is the most patient guy. I think if you sustain or been around that group of players when like 2 years ago, I think that's probably like a good barometer that's a true statement. But yeah, at the same time, this is now I feel like they grew up a lot, as they should, as a competition makes you mature and as age should. So yeah, I'm really happy to see what that maturity brings to them and their process. I've felt much more humility than I expected going into this interview, and
Mhm.
that also has me course correct. Like definitely, like that. Okay, this is certainly always a thing. Like the more familiar you are with the subject, the more prone you are to overrating them, and this has been a curse for me for many seasons. But yeah, my evaluation of this team went up by talking to them, just based on the factors of knowledge, even accounting for the familiarity bias.
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head and probably used a better word than, the edge of cheese, let's say. I think No Hill does bring an air of unorthodox ideas, right? And I think it's not lost on me, especially with what you're saying and, what the interview kind of gave us as well. I think it was OG that kind of commented on, Wheats being that familiarity. Obviously, it sounds like a lot of the players respect Yosaurus, but having somebody that, they've worked with before, having that they are familiar with in Wheats join the team, I think is probably beneficial for them as well. So they have like a home base they can return to. They have somebody that they can maybe even confide in, right? I think that's super, super helpful. When you are challenged from, a head coach that is kind of stepping into the role as, it's his first venture, looks to be very successful, to be fair. Um, and I think just in general, this is just a success on all fronts for Defiant. And I think that like it's a breath of fresh air to see this from them, where not only are they being proactive in the off season, they know what kind of talent they have. They know that, a lot of these a lot of these players are good on the microphone, and being agile in the offseason to kind of put them out there, get them ready for, possibly an increase in content from Defiant in the season. Bringing in somebody a little bit more on an orthodox and no hill that has been extremely successful in his own right to add a little bit of an edge to a team that, if we're going to look at the track records, we're going to look at Speed Elise Hero Pool. We're going to look at Sam's track record last year. We're going to look at Hydron, right? These are players that have some depth to them, right? There's something here that you can find, you can use to catch people off guard, or maybe even kind of force a style that gives teams a lot of problems. It's it is a recipe for success, right? And as much as it irritates you, I think barring any kind of tank additions to Atlanta, I think No Hill, like it did for you, probably only makes me more excited to see this team because I just personally, I do tend to kind of lean into the flexibility, having, a little bit more. It's not anti-strat, but having some kind of unique strategy to you, I think does throw a lot of teams some problems. It really throws a wrench into things, and it's difficult to course correct on the fly for a lot of teams. I think there's a lot of just mirroring that goes on in Overwatch, and I don't think you can just always mirror teams that are just hyper specific or hyper stylized. You look at Atlanta London last year and the GOATS comparisons in the past, and it's not something you always want to do. So it's a big win. W's all around for Defiant, and I am super, super excited to see them play.
Big one.
Any final big ones there?
Nope.
0 for the big ones. Now, when it comes to contenders, it has been rough in these streets for a hot little bit. But with the news of Pro Am, and obviously, in more recent news, they got a calendar, which I think is kind of exciting. I don't think that's like super normal for them. I think like having a roadmap for what the season is going to look like, having some general dates. I think that's kind of good signs, no?
Yeah. I mean, that's just helps consuming the product, right? Like everything that adds
100%,
to
of course.
clarity is great. Um, I also think it's kind of needed, considering like how
100%.
the importance of Path to Pro is now increase. It's funny that we are definitely increasing the importance of Path to Pro, but it still feels less important simply because the academy teams are gone and everything. But
Sure.
yeah, no, like this is all good stuff. Um, One thing, I wonder. I'm not criticizing necessarily. I think, like for instance, the preseason pro am overlapping with the spring series, kind of interesting. But then again, you know you got to have overlap with that amount of offering that you have in tier two. I don't think you
Sure.
can necessarily keep that from happening. I think the big one is to sort of it's a little it was important to avoid that collegiate spring series and pro am were happening at the same time. Um,
Mm.
I think that's achieved. So yeah, I don't hate it. Good on transparency. Um, and then honestly, also I'd love to see some international play between contest regions, but that's of course like making big asks at this point.
I mean, yeah, that one's tough. I think thus far, I would definitely echo the sentiment. I think it is super exciting to see some semblance of normalcy kind of come back for the Path to Pro. I think obviously the game kind of needs it, right? Been a criticism for a long time. The talent pipeline, yada yada. We've heard it here a number of times. So getting some love, getting some early bricklaying for the future of the game is definitely nice. And I think talking to our producer Eric even prior to the show, the the idea that there is going to be some Overwatch happening all year long is exciting. Hopefully there's some increase. Maybe there's some events TBD. I hopefully that's not me leaking, but that's me crossing my fingers that maybe something like a gauntlet comes back in maybe a smaller fashion than what it once was. But I think there is just a room. There is this like really sweet spot in the what looks to be like the 2023 off season going into the 2024 season, where there is room for a big event, right? A big last chance to get a amateur showing to all the scouts in the league, right? It's that kind of traditional sports combine, you know, feel that I feel like a lot of the fans that come from, T sports, the meat sports heads kind of, are a little bit more attracted to. Um, Obviously it's not, the most exciting thing ever, but maybe there's an increase in marketing when it comes to Path to Pro with the return of Overwatch World Cup. I don't know. Is that too much to ask for? I don't know. I'm just hoping that there's a little bit more under the hood. This is great signs early on, but yeah, I think there's still some room to keep injecting tier two with some big steroids. Get them nice and thick. Get them strong.
Okay. But, okay. I'll just let that sit awkwardly with the viewer. You can
That's fine.
take this with your imagination wherever it may. Maybe you need to stop the
Wherever.
episode at this point. We're
Hey,
not judging.
hopefully not. I mean, I'd be kind of honored if you got this far. That's just
True.
impressive to me that you've made it this far and haven't like skipped through the old timestamps. One thing that I did want to kind of bring up, something that we did kind of talk about prior to the show within regards to the Gladiators. Our producer Eric so kindly kind of put this in out into the ether. Is there a question regarding the situation with the guard and the staff layoffs and the reported reevaluation of their position in esports? I think both Kevin Hitt and a few journalists, I want to say Jacob Wolf also tweeted out something that was also backing this up that, the guard and Cronky KSE esports rather. This may be the last season for the Gorillas and the Gladiators, right? If they don't get a buyer, this may be the last stand for them. So how does that necessarily lean on the players? Is this something that is going to maybe light a fire under them, or is this kind of disenfranchising, do you think?
Mm, I think. Yeah, I mean, this probably initially shook them. however that turns out in terms of motivation is probably very personal question to the players, how they cope with that.
Sure.
I think that everyone at this point, that these players have a quality that they would have, like if they want to have employment next year, if everything goes to plan, they can, right? They are good enough to still at least be capable of playing for a team in the lower ranks, even if everything goes wrong here. So I don't think they should be too scared or too concerned here. And yeah, I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like once again the whole guard situation. Like I don't want to necessarily comment or to talk about it. I think everyone smart has said something. Probably said too many things. Like everyone gets it. I think. So
Yeah.
I'm a kind of tired of this discourse at this point. Like we know where we're at. We know that we pumped this heavily for a long time,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
now we sort of seen the results of that, and yeah, we'll
Bit.
get through it eventually, right?
No, we 100% will, and I think this is kind of a question that the general audience is kind of asking themselves, right? Like, if your contract isn't guaranteed, like, are you necessarily gonna play up to expectations? I think it's a safe assumption, at least on my end, that I will shoulder alone. You don't have to put this on Yiska. I think that competitors just want to compete, regardless of the situation and the internals of the team. I think at the end of the day, much like a lot of the discourse around the pro am of like, oh, how serious are all teams going to take this? Nobody wants to lose. Nobody wants to lose to contenders teams or lose in general, right? This isn't a team that's necessarily uh, bad, right? Even at the top of the show, as much criticism I want to levy them, um, this isn't a bad team. Like they're going to be competitive. They probably will reach into a playoffs and pull out some significant wins and maybe even upset some top teams, depending on what happens. Um, so no, I don't think that this is something to even speculate about. I really don't, unless this gets so bad that players logistically have a hard time competing. There's no reason to assume anything from the front office of the guard is going to like hinder them from competing at the top level where they should be competing. So kind of wanted to get that out there because I can already hear people bemoaning future underperformances. It's like, oh, KSE must not be paying him. It's I don't think so, guys. I think that the reality is it's probably a little bit more simple. It's either that they're living up to expectations or they're not. I don't think there's much logistics here that you can kind of quote unless players come out and say otherwise. So we will see. Anything else on the table that we want to tackle before we wrap up?
I don't think I've necessarily anything on the docket. I think this year. Let me say this year is very weird. I think a lot of stuff will be different.
Okay.
I think in terms of seriousness, how people take it, I think a lot of people have said they are taking the tournament, the Pro Am serious. Will say that if it was that serious, they probably would have all started scrimming way earlier and with way more blocks. So it's not like they are taking it Overwatch League serious.
Sure.
That also means that effectively we're now watching Scrimbucks play out live on camera,
Sure.
which is great. I think that's monetizing that pretty well, especially also against the pressure of playing against tier 2. So I'm not sure if we're going to, if I'm going to have a Scrimbucks piece this year. I'm looking forward to doing like power rankings with teams maybe and reaching out for maybe another budget piece. I think that's good information to have for an audience going into the season and setting expectations there. I think that wait, where was I? Working memory. past midnight level
Power
brain fray.
rankings,
Oh
Pro
yeah,
AM.
like we probably I don't know about in your mind, what were we doing?
Okay.
Were we going to do power rankings before the Pro Am or after when we have better knowledge?
I mean the the asshole that just wants to be right would love to do it after. The content creator, juice head in me wants to do it before to get, more traction, I suppose. Um, I don't particularly care either way.
Mm-hmm.
I think it probably would be best after just to get like a better look. To provide.
Almost seems too easy,
Yeah, it is.
But
too
then
easy,
again,
but
it has always been easy because once again, I got the Scrimbucks.
it might be easy for you if you're just basing it off of information that coaches and whoever provides you. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's we'll leave it up in the air. Maybe we will. Maybe you can leave in the comments below if not to necessarily bait engagement, but that is something that would be kind of a helpful piece of feedback. Would you rather our yearly power rankings come out prior or post? I have to assume it's probably going to be a little weighted to prior, sooner rather than later. But definitely let us know if that's something you want. And who knows with in regards to like the patch schedule, maybe there's going to be a patch for like the first stage or the first split stage, whatever you want to call it these days, because there's only 2 of them. Maybe that changes. Maybe the Pro Am won't be super reflective. Who's to say? There's still some things left up in the air. With in regards to like scrims, obviously there's some scrims out there apparently that you can view. I will probably will be partaking in that as well. Getting a little itchy for some Overwatch. And within regards to that, obviously Boston and Florida may have something cooking up. I know they've been tweeting back and forth. I don't know if there's anything there, but I think that would also be a potential avenue for content. Some early, exhibitions showcasing the team, letting people get excited ahead of the Pro AM, which feels like another, excitement catalyst in some ways. So a lot of content to hopefully potentially see. And I think that's pretty much it for us today, or this week rather. Anything else? Anything you've been up to?
No. I mean, I've been doing a bit of gaming here and there, but I feel like we're now. I'll rush out more interviews. I can tell you the No Hill interview isn't just the only one I have that day. I'm finally sitting down with that one player that had near clairvoyant balance insights, and also honestly some pretty sweet, or in my opinion, pretty good takes on the season format discussion. I am cooking up a feedback article based on season format that's hopefully coming out the same day you're watching this, so maybe refresh your feed. We'll see. I collected a bunch of feedback from all kinds of scene insiders in order to get an idea what they think about the season format. Some very interesting takes, some very critical takes. I will say I came in not liking it as much, but now I have seen the light based on the explanations. And that said, I do think from an Overwatch League perspective, one can be highly critical of the direction that season formats have taken, both from a competitive integrity, a fan, a player, and an ownership perspective. As a fan of Overwatch esports overall, I think that's the offering there is interesting. I'll make the argument, or let others make the argument. Hopefully, either tomorrow, probably tomorrow, tomorrow my time, today your time, whenever you're watching this, whatever. And yeah, I'm excited for that one. And yeah, and once again, the interviews with No Hill and a big brain player, probably more a next week thing.
All right, definitely not too many interview sources out there these days. So if you're, fiending for some Overwatch content, definitely stay tuned to Yiska's Twitter feed and the GG Recon YouTube and or Twitter Avenue channels, whatever you want to call them. I think for me, at least, there is still a looming project that I need to finish, among other things that I need to do. And there is kind of this nagging itch to kind of demystify some things in esports that kind of is the project a mic stand, says Eric. No. Currently, I'm speaking to you from a mic in a box. I bought a new mic. Obviously, you can probably tell. I didn't have a stand that was compatible with said mic, so I, with the assistance of our lovely producer Eric, found a way to not have to hold it for 90 minutes. So, no, that is not the project. The project is kind of a crystalline long form piece around a very, very famous series in Overwatch. If you know me, you probably know what it is. But no, there is this piece that I want to write that kind of like demystifies esports in general, because I as somebody who I think maybe even still does this, kind of overemphasizes, who not who the players are, but like assumes a lot regarding strategy and logistics, and I just don't think it's that or I don't think it's that big, right? It's not that crazy. It most oftentimes isn't crazy. Let's put it that way. And there was this very interesting clip that I had shoved in my face, thanks to the algorithm at play that I feel like exemplifies it. So maybe it'll be a short form piece. Maybe it'll be a medium. Who knows? Maybe I'll sell it to somebody. We'll see. Or maybe I won't do it at all. Who knows? But yeah, that's pretty much on the docket for me. Any last final thoughts? Anything we're excited about next week?
I mean, I'm looking forward to some. It's not happening next week, but sheesh, I gotta get some pro Overwatch in me, dude. Like,
I know
it's been a while. Like, I always feel like whatever problems you have with the guideline, like you're also starting to cannibalize yourselves. Everyone's sort of like bored and fidgeting around. Fires a couple of people because you got to do something, but at the end of the day, like everything feels good in the moments that esports happens. So I'm looking forward to that.
Ditto. I've been chewing on some of Spilo's content, consuming a little bit of the Vegas trials. That was very insightful, very interesting. Definitely colors that team, at least in my eyes, moving forward. Some room for improvement, TLDR. Very excited to maybe even dive into his content, which I believe features Funny Astro, to kind of help him a little bit, because I don't think he gets some of the credit he deserves. Producing some of the best, analytical content, I think, out there, period. I think his review of some of those leak scrims that I think Dante and Kalush both participated in is going to be next on the docket in that regard. And then obviously Pro-Am should, if all things, line up, should be happening sometime soon, no?
When does it start, Eric? March 23rd.
March 23rd.
Okay,
so
we got some
end
time.
of the month.
We got some time.
Yeah. We got time, but, we got to figure out who's playing in it, right?
You know
so
what? That's
whenever.
Why I don't know why I thought it was the 16th. Maybe we can juice a little bit. That's. Ooh. Now
Ooh.
I got. They give me one more week of cooking, even though I should definitely have known this. And, okay, March 13th is the 5.
He's cooking
roster. Men. Yeah.
There's a team out there that specifically is in NA, that's new to NA, that has no ties to anybody. LA Valiant is kind of under the button. No?
Yeah, they kind of need to. I mean, there's a bunch of teams that just haven't announced shit yet. Like, we don't know what the Justice officially looks like. We don't know what the NYXL look like. London needs to report too. Like 80% of APAC hasn't said shit. Like I feel like the news got to be coming in very soon. I think this is also like Overwatch League. Don't leak those signings on your website. Challenge impossible. Let's
Impossible.
hope.
Yeah. If the jersey's leaked,
what a blunder! What an absolute. Oh.
It seems like there's always one every year, right? There's always somebody who just gets leaked on the website first before anybody even, hears about it. So I wouldn't be surprised if that starts happening even faster.
And so, like, you'd think like the sluggishness of big companies would make it like less likely for this stuff to happen. But of course, like because you have so many more notes of communication where shit can go wrong. It's bound to happen.
Yep.
But the more important it is to have people working on the product that kind of vibe with that, right? So yeah,
kind of an important thing to get right. If the left hand was ever going to talk to the right hand, it better be to schedule things at the proper times. That's if anything in esports is holy, it's scheduling.
I wonder. I'd love to just see how much esports dollar just evaporated with that simple. If that dude just like lost his salary that day by putting that up online, it might have been in terms of not saying he should, but like I'm saying like the evaporation of esports dollars that happened there in terms of the engagement that orgs are likely to get from that is maybe very significant. We'll see.
There's probably quite a few C-level executives that are probably pretty unhappy with you in particular, person who may or may not have leaked the jerseys and or roster moves in the past and or present and or future. So yeah, it's definitely something that feels like Overwatch has a pretty piss poor track record. But that being said, itching for some Overwatch. It's coming next week. If everything pans out, hopefully we will be kind of closely examining the Soul Infernal. Maybe the entire roster. We'll have to wait and see what they got cooking over there.
Mm-hmm.
With who? That remains to be seen, but it seems like that's at least the future news cycle. So if that excites you, if you want to support the show, can't do so monetarily, you could always download the podcast. That helps us get discoverable, however you want to say that. It puts us in the algorithm, helps us a lot. Like and subscribe, all that garbage that the YouTubers and the influencers say these days. And yeah, any final thoughts for you, Yiska?
Live long and prosper.
For the week? Live long. Okay, how are you going to do that to the Star Wars nerds after you put me as Darth Joe?
That's the point.
Oh, you are Brayton. That's you're dirty. You play rough. Anyways, before he does any kind of other nerd faux pas, that's episode 285. We will see you guys next week. Adios.
Beast.